I was 22 and living on my own for the first time when this happened. It was the mid-90s. I had just gotten off work around 11 p.m. to reach my apartment building. I could either walk on the sidewalk or cut across the communal garden. I saved about a whole minute of walking time by cutting through the communal garden. But being young and stupid, I often took the shortcut. That night, however, I got that weird feeling not to take the shortcut. I kept to the sidewalk, even though there was no one else around. When I got past the garden, all of a sudden, this large man popped up from its exit path. There was no way he could have been in front of me, or just standing behind me as I was walking. I would have noticed him. The only logical explanation was that he had been hiding in the pitch-black garden. Perhaps a drunk who had been sleeping it off. But my body was screaming at me to get the hell out of there. I began walking faster. My dad had taught me to always carry my keys in my fist, with a key pointed out, in case I needed to defend myself. So I had done that. But I'm only 5'4", and probably weighed 110 pounds. This guy was tall and big. My only chance was to outpace him. I was speed walking at this point, and I could feel him matching my pace, getting closer. He was breathing heavily, and I felt this angry energy coming off of him. But my apartment building was right there, so I put on a burst of speed. When I reached the entrance, 2 people were leaving and held the door for me, and him too. I don't know why I didn't tell them I thought this guy was following me. My mind froze, and I was just trying to get inside my apartment. Plus, I was still trying to rationalize it. Maybe he was visiting someone in the building. Maybe it was all just a coincidence. Don't be paranoid, I told myself. Besides, it took only a couple of seconds for them to be out the door. I had missed my chance. I climbed the stairs as fast as I could. It's a 3-story building, and I live on the 3rd floor. He's climbing the stairs too, still right behind me. I get to my floor, which has 4 apartments on the right side where I live, and 4 on the left. I pass by apartments 1 and 2. He's still right behind me. I stop at apartment 3, where I live, and he stops in front of apartment 4, where I know he doesn't live. He hasn't said anything, just breathing hard, and I think there's no way I'm going to open my apartment door and have him push me inside and assault me, or worse. He also hasn't knocked on the door of apartment 4. It's worth noting that the apartments are U-shaped, with mine and my neighbor's doors being very close together. So, I bang on my own apartment door as loud as I can, but yell my neighbor's name. "Hey Kevin, let me in." This startles the guy even more, so when my own apartment door doesn't open, but Kevin's does. Kevin sees the guy standing right in front of his door and asks what he wants. The guy starts mumbling something about the wrong apartment, but I have my own door open so fast that I'm inside my place in a flash, locking the door behind me. I grab my cordless phone to call the police, but I hear Kevin through the door telling this guy he needs to leave. The guy does. Kevin knocks on my door, asks if I'm okay. I thank him and say that I am, but inside, I'm still frozen, adrenaline pumping and scared. I thank him again and tell him to have a good night, and I lock my door again. I have my phone in my hand, ready to call the police, but I start trying to rationalize it again. What exactly happened? A guy followed me home, but then he said he had the wrong apartment. Are the cops going to care about something minor like that? I try to calm myself down, but I'm also berating myself. Why didn't I run the instant I felt him following me? Why didn't I tell the people we passed when the front door opened that I thought I was being chased? Worse, why didn't I tell Kevin that the second he opened his door and saved me. He could have let me inside his apartment, and we could have called the cops together. But because of my stupidity, everything felt so ambiguous, and I was questioning myself. A couple of weeks later, I'm visiting my grandparents, and my grandfather is reading the paper. He tells me that a woman was assaulted in the apartment building across the street from mine. It's the same guy. He had multiple convictions for sexual assault and had recently been released on parole. And then there was this kid, about 12 to 13 years old, who would always mess with me and my friends when we were playing outside. He'd often block our path with his bike, and when we politely asked him to stop, he'd agree, and then make things worse. One day, we decided to confront him in a mature and kind way, asking him to please stop messing with us. He pretended to comply, saying he'd talk to his sister about it, but when he went to her, she started cussing us out and threatening us. We quickly left, feeling confused and frustrated. Later, the kid lied, claiming we had punched him and threatened him. We had to convince our parents of the truth, realizing that this kid had been gaslighting us all along. It was a disturbing experience, and we made sure to avoid him as much as possible after that. Moving on to another chilling incident, before becoming an EMT, I was a team leader for a lifeline service in the UK. We received a call for a smoke alarm activation in a house about 5 minutes away from our call center. All I could hear initially was the beeping of the smoke alarm, distorted because it was so loud. In the background, I heard a faint but panicked call for help, and what sounded like the service user desperately asking for water. I immediately called the fire service and kept the call open, listening as a roaring sound gradually got louder. Then, I heard a cracking and popping sound, probably the windows. I'm not fully sure what I heard then, but it sounded like the man faintly screaming and making gurgling sounds. After several minutes of listening to this and repeating instructions for him to get outside, I could hear respirators and the beeping of the fire service's radios. At this point, I decided to leave the call center being run by my colleagues and drive to this house. I thought they must have rescued him, but I was in denial about what I actually heard. Once I arrived, the fire service told me that they still hadn't found anyone. About an hour later, I was informed that they'd found a body. This man, a wheelchair user, was found right next to his wheelchair by the back door, locked inside the house. I had to go to a coroner's court to explain my involvement. This is where I learned he was a smoker who regularly lit his cigarettes with matches. I was going home from university, and to get home, I have to use the train. As I got on, a lot of the seats were occupied. In my country, the seats are put in a way so that 4 people can talk and sit in front of each other. And they're kind of close, perfect for talking even with strangers. Sadly, I see that there is a free space in front of this girl who's 1 or 2 years younger than me, but you can never know. I go there and ask her if I can sit down. Of course, she replied, and looked at me in a strange, intense way. I pulled out my phone to distract myself from her. She also had chocolate in her hand. Keep that in mind. She asked me, where do I live? And I was like, why do you have to know? So she asked when I'm going to get off the train. I told her the place, and she told me that she's getting off at the next one. She started singing, then said, "Oh, sometimes I sing. I'm a silly girl," then did it again. Whenever she said something, she looked at me like she was waiting for a response. So I replied, "It's okay to be silly," because I just didn't want to talk to her. Then she told me that I'm pretty, and when I asked what, She asked if she's pretty in my language. The second one is an extension of the first, so it seemed like she corrected herself. Then she asked if she had chocolate on her face. She did. I also had the chocolate in her hand offered to me, but I declined. She also told me about her piercing that came off, and she put it on in the middle of the train. I told her that she should fix it when she got off, and she said, "In Germany, will you go there with me?" But obviously, I told her no. While she tried to put her piercing back in her mouth, she told me that she's in love with me. I told her that I have a girlfriend. I didn't. And that the pacing is too fast for me. And she told me that she will beat my girlfriend. Her "I love you" started escalating into "I'll kidnap you and strip for me." She asked me if I will go with her, and if she could go home with me. Then, when the train arrived at my destination, she asked me, "Are you going, love?" I told her yes, and went on my way. Luckily, she didn't follow me home. She also asked me when we were going to meet again, and hopefully, that's never. I was around 8 when we moved into an old house-shop combination. The bottom is a commercial building with a big open room, a kitchen, and 2 medium-sized rooms connected to each other, and one connected to the open room. Upstairs is the living space. The layout of the bottom is fairly important. Also, the kitchen leads to the stairs, but you cannot see the kitchen from the open room. We moved in, and from the start, I despised the place. I got bad, horrible, dare I say, energy from the place, and I don't tend to get that. In the open room, there was a large painting with a strange representation of what would seem to be a rapture event. A burning cross on top of a large Bible, a church with a crowd surrounding it, and a river on fire. Every time I would walk by this painting, my stomach sank horribly. Imagine watching someone you love die. We got rid of this painting very soon. The previous owners were an older couple, but the husband had died about 5 years before we moved in, leaving the lady as a widow. She was strange. They had lived there for 2 decades, and she was so emotionless. Obviously, this could be grief, but it was 5 years ago that he died. She was extremely emotionless, as if she was dead in the body of a living person. She had this look in her eyes, as if she'd seen unimaginable things. Anyways, we moved in nonetheless, and there were already problems everywhere. If you were upstairs, you would be watched by something, but always watched. There was a mirror in the front of the stairs that I swear was cursed, and I could not look in that thing without having a panic attack. My room went dark. I literally couldn't go into it. My body restricted me. Now, the lady that lived there did not clean the place. There were strangely piles of flies everywhere. They seemed like they were an offering of some sort, the way they were laid out in a perfect mound. Into the actual events, there actually weren't many, but the few that did happen were major. For one, soon after we moved in, my aunt came over. My aunt is more like my older sister. Long story. Anyways, soon after she left, she told me at a family gathering that when she was there, she saw a 4-legged creature that had the face of a human, but long stretched hind legs and long teeth. You might think she was trying to scare me, but she isn't the type, I promise. Then we took a photo of nothing important, but a photo. This photo had a face in it. A humanoid face that was completely pale white with pitch black eyes and no hair. The structure was an oval, not a human head, like a stretched oval. Anyways, the next day, my mom and I went down to the rest of the night. I stayed up with her. watching through the windows, feeling a sense of unease that I couldn't shake. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. But the memory of those strange, dog-like figures lingered in my mind. My mom and I decided to dig deeper into what had happened. We talked to neighbors, trying to gather any information that could shed light on the bizarre events. Some mentioned hearing strange noises at night, while others shared stories of seeing odd shadows moving around the area, but no one had a definitive explanation. As days passed, things returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the incident left us both unsettled. We couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right in our neighborhood. My mom became even more vigilant about keeping the dogs indoors, and I made sure to visit more frequently to lend her support. Yet, despite our efforts to move on, the memory of those eerie encounters still haunts us. We can't help but wonder what lurks in the shadows of our rural surroundings, and whether those strange, dog-like figures were just a figment of our imagination, or something far more sinister. But for now, all we can do is stay vigilant and hope that whatever lurks in the darkness stays far away from our doorstep. Claim there was an attack the previous night near the watchtower. We're all puzzled and a bit scared. They're blaming us for not following protocol, apparently. A soldier saw two figures lurking around outside the fence, and when he whistled as a warning, they charged at him. He fired a few shots, and apparently, they disappeared into thin air. The whole camp was searched, but no trace was found, except for footprints leading towards the glacier. We were explicitly told not to venture beyond the fenced area. Especially at night, they were convinced it was some sort of militant attack. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something else, entirely something otherworldly, perhaps, lurking in the shadows of the Himalayan night. Turns out that there was a bear in the compound last night, and someone left the gates open. There were footprints all around the tent. The army guys wanted to know who stepped out last night and who left the main gate open. The guy on the watchtower got a heavy telling off from his superior. We were scared and didn't own up to it. This has been a secret between me and my friend. To this day, I still don't have any fear of bears, but it was so close to a real disaster. This story happened recently, and for some context, me and my friends are teens that like to explore and do stupid stuff like normal teenagers do. We found this tunnel that was a drain under a busy road. We had to crouch and sit on our skateboards to explore it, since the height of the tunnel was short. As we were going deeper into the tunnel, it gets pitch black, and the flashlights from our phones can only reach about 5 feet in front of us. So we were blind to what we could come across until we were very close to it. In the tunnel, I remember the wall was painted all red and had sheets of metal with white handprints connected to clothespins. We decided to keep going until we reached what we thought was a dead end. It was not. On the left was a more square tunnel compared to the rectangle shape we were in. In the distance of the connected tunnel, there was a bright light coming from the outside, shining from above onto a red shopping cart with belongings in it. We slowly inched towards the light where the shopping cart was. The light turned out to be a big hole in the ground that we could crawl out of if we needed an escape. As we were about to pass the shopping cart, my friend, who was in the lead, was too afraid to go forward anymore. It was pitch black about 5 feet from where we were. I decided to take the lead and keep going. I stepped past the shopping cart and stopped. I don't know what it was, but I was afraid. I had a gut feeling something was back there. I slowly moved back. I stopped. I swear I saw something move from the deep dark of the tunnel. Before I could put everything together, a loud echo of someone pounding an object on the walls of the tunnel struck me, causing everybody to freak out and crawl out of the escape hole. Once we got out, a homeless man ran to us, asking what we were doing in there. We told him we were just exploring. He explained to us that there's a man that lives underground in that tunnel, and he would have killed us if we went further. The man was apparently crazy and threw a rock at the poor guy's head. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but even though it was scary and dangerous, it was fun, and I'm glad I experienced it. I work a really late shift at my job at Taco Bell. I don't get off until midnight. Just a couple of days ago, when my shift was over and I was heading home, I noticed two guys walking the same way I was. They were in front of me for some time, so I wasn't worried. And I guess it helped that I carry mace and a knife with me everywhere I go. At some point, when I looked up from whatever game I was playing on my phone, the guys were gone. I didn't think anything of it, as I just assumed that the guys turned off somewhere. And I continued making the 45-minute walk back home. After a few minutes of noticing the guys were gone, I heard footsteps behind me. I glanced behind and noticed it was one of the guys I saw earlier, but it was just him. I don't know where the other guy was. I immediately knew something was wrong with this. So I picked up my pace, put my phone away, and grabbed the mace from my pocket. I did my best to keep cool and not let him know I was aware of the situation, but I was freaking out internally. I kept walking in the direction of my home, but I wasn't intending on going home and letting him know where I lived. I knew that a couple of blocks ahead of me was a 7-Eleven, and I knew one of the guys working there, as he's a friend of the family and lives in my neighborhood. As soon as I saw the gas station, I turned and quickly walked up to the doors with the guy still following me. I've never had to use my mace or knife ever, and I was still hoping to not have to. I walked inside the gas station and was thankful the guy I knew was working. I walked up to him and quickly informed him of what was going on. He let me chill in the store with him until he got off work. That guy stayed outside of the gas station the entire time I was in there, but he never went in. I'm so thankful my friend was working that night, and he was able to give me a ride home. I don't know what I would have done if he wasn't. This was about 20 years ago, and I still think about this creeper from time to time. I was working the overnight shift at the local gas station, and part of the overnight shift was building the Sunday newspapers. The paper company would deliver stacks of the different sections, and we'd have to assemble the papers and put them out for sale. We had a little nook set up in the back corner of the store where we would do this. You could clearly see the door from the spot, and we didn't get a lot of traffic in the middle of the night. We had 2 panic buttons in the store, one mounted under the counter, and the portable one that I always carried in my apron pocket. One evening, I'm back in the nook, and a guy walks in and straight back to me. He's very tall, thin, and pale. He's dressed all in black, including a full-length black trench coat. He asks me if I've seen anything strange tonight. I'm thinking that he's the strangest thing that I've seen in a while. I replied no, and asked him if there was anything that I could help him with. He then went on a rant about how he is on a mission from God to wipe out all the demons that are walking amongst men. He can see people's true forms, and that's why he carries this for protection. As I'm simultaneously myself and pressing my pocket panic button, this wacko pulls a cross out of his pocket. It had to be 7 inches long. He then hollers that God is calling and runs out the door. A few seconds later, the cops show up, and I fill them in. They drove up and down the stretch of road that we were on and didn't find anyone on foot. They came back and told me to keep my button close, and they check on me periodically. That was one of the longest nights of my life, and I quit shortly after. You see a lot of crazy working the night shift, but that guy was a whole lot of crazy that I didn't want to meet again. My mom was a single parent, and as such, she worked almost constantly and was nearly always tired. Due to that, she was not the most present parent, despite being only 2 years older than my sister. I was headstrong and insisted on acting as the man of the family, putting on a tough face and powering through things like comforting my sister when she had a nightmare. This happened while we were on a shopping trip. I'd say I was about 7, making my sister Alice about 5. She was a talkative child, always requiring someone's attention. And yet, neither Mom nor I noticed that she disappeared until we reached the checkout. Thinking she'd simply gotten distracted and wandered off, Mom wasn't too concerned, and I volunteered to go get her. I walked past the aisles, peeking my head down each to try and spot her dark curly hair and pink jumper when I heard muffled crying and a woman trying to shush someone. Rounding the corner to investigate, I saw something chilling. A woman crouched down desperately, trying to quiet my crying sister with her hands Vic-like on her wrist. Seeing me, the woman put on a smile and tried to shoo me away. Don't worry, she just had a little fall. I vividly remember little 7-year-old me straightening up, puffing my chest to look as tough as possible, and with a glare, I spat out, "That's my sister." Her smile dropped, and she let go of Alice. I grabbed her and ran back to the front where my mom was waiting outside. She didn't seem too concerned about the lady, despite the nail marks on my sister's arm. And we just went home. I'm 21 now, so shopping child grabber for your sake. Let's not meet again. This all started because my mom needed a few things from Walmart, and I was going there anyway. So I decided to save her the trouble and get the stuff for her. I get what I need and check out. I walked outside and realized I parked on the other side of the store, so I started walking. I had an uneasy feeling, but I pushed it away by saying it was just my social anxiety kicking in. Okay, so I get to the row I'm parked on, and I'm closing in on my car when I noticed these 2 guys walking behind me. I thought nothing of it because the Walmart was packed when I went in, so I just ignored them until I realized they weren't stopping. They were following me all the way back to my car. To put it in perspective, I parked on the very end away from everybody else, so I wouldn't get my car door smacked in. They stopped a few feet from the spot beside me and watched me get in the car. I stood there for a minute, but walked away when they saw me pull my phone out. I called my dad, shaking and explaining everything to him. He stayed on the phone with me until I calmed down enough to drive home. And you might be saying, well, that's not bad. But it gets worse. I'm still on the phone with my dad trying to calm down when I noticed they came back. But this time, they're in their car. They slowly drive by my car, and the one in the passenger seat looks at me with a creepy smile and waves at me in a flirty way. And then they drove off. Let's just say I didn't leave that parking lot for a while. I felt sick, kind of like the flu. I felt completely fine in the morning, but it got worse as the day went on. It was the middle of the night, and I was up with my husband and our new 6-week-old baby. I was pumping breast milk. Next thing I know, I'm waking up to EMTs surrounding me on my bed, telling me not to move or sit up. My heart rate was incredibly high, and my blood pressure was incredibly low. They took me to the hospital, and no one knew what was wrong with me for a while. They kept asking me what drugs I took. I kept telling them nothing, which was true. I had just had a baby. The biggest drug I was taking was Tylenol. They didn't believe me for a while. I couldn't remember a lot of things at this point. I could barely even remember my own kid's name. I couldn't tell them who the president was or what year it was when they asked. It was a weird feeling to have memory missing, kind of like having lost some puzzle pieces. Talking was also kind of difficult. After a bunch of tests, it turns out I had a UTI so bad that I went into septic shock, and my kidneys were shutting down. I didn't know I had a UTI because I was still healing from childbirth, and I'm pretty asymptomatic when it comes to UTIs. I spent a few days in the ICCU. It was extra scary considering my brand new baby was at home, and I wasn't. And there was a chance I wouldn't make it home at all. In the end, I thankfully made a full recovery. It's not as intense as some other people's stories. Sepsis is no joke. So I would say that maybe on average, once a month, I get this strange feeling that everything around me is fake or staged. It's pretty difficult to describe. It almost feels like I'm on a movie set or something similar, but not quite. I've been getting this feeling since at least middle school. It's kind of similar to the feeling you get when you experience déjà vu, except without the feeling of re-experiencing something, if that makes any sense. It's more of a sensory thing than anything else, like how the lights hit certain things, or the ambient sounds, or a feeling in the air. Everything just seems off. It can be extremely unsettling at times, but usually it doesn't bother me at all. At first, it used to really freak me out, but now I just write it off as my mind playing tricks on me, and I don't actually think anything strange is going on. It usually happens at night or early AM before the sunrise, but occasionally happens during the day too. It mostly happens when I'm outside, but it does sometimes happen when I'm inside too. It usually only happens for a short amount of time, like from a minute to an hour max. Does anyone else get these feelings? Does anyone know why I get this weird feeling? Am I just crazy or why? It doesn't really affect my life in any real way. It just kind of throws me off for the whole day when it happens. I spent my childhood in a village between the countryside and the city. It was a quiet place like any small village one perceives during childhood. The case I'm going to talk about is not terrifying, but it is mysterious. There is a man who often prowls along the farm, the bookstore not far away from my mother's house, and the metro stations. He's not dangerous. He's even a nice person, but almost everyone makes fun of him and thinks he's crazy. I don't really know much about him, but I do know this. His name is Elaine. He's a man who is in the Vietnam War. I saw him again not too long ago while shopping with my mother. He greeted us and came to tell us that he'd seen aliens. He always whistles friendly Western film music on the way while he walks, always seeming cheerful, but very lonely. I don't even know where he lives. He's the kind of man who tells you that one day he's a grandmaster black belt in karate, and then another day he's going to act in a cowboy movie, that he was a close friend of Bruce Lee, and other things. Most disturbing is his obsession with aliens and fairies, but when you talk to him, you get used to it. I've known him for many years, and he hasn't changed. He's someone who hasn't aged physically. It's very disturbing. He says he traveled back in time. When my son was 2 years old, he started acting as if he was interacting with something or someone that his father and I could never see, like throwing toys down the hallway and then running away murmuring words. When I asked what he was doing, he always told me that he was giving toys to the boy for him to play with. There was never anybody there, but it was always icy cold leading into the garage. I'd asked him what the boy's name was, and he would tell me Da was his name. I always asked what the boy was doing. Waiting for his mom to pick him up, he would always reply, "We put it down to an imaginary friend, and nothing more harmless," we thought, until he started waking up in the middle of the night, screaming, saying, "Dawn won't let me sleep. He keeps tickling my toes." They sent chills down my spine, and so my son would sleep in my bed with me every night. This continued for another 6 months, until the real estate notified us that the owner of the house had died, and his children would be selling the property and splitting the profit between them, meaning we had to move. After we left, I came across a local news article about the owner of our old rental, stating how much he will be missed by the community. He had been raised by his mother in the house we were renting since he was a child. Then I noticed his name, and everything came flooding back to me. His name was Dawn. My son's imaginary friend was our homeowner. He must have been waiting for his mother to come and take him to the other side. I'll never look at imaginary friends the same. I was shopping at a grocery store. I was in the drink aisle reaching for something when I suddenly got a bad feeling. I turned my head to look back and jumped when a man who was extremely close to me, like an inch behind me, quickly moved past me. My knee-jerk reaction was to reach for my back pocket to make sure my car key was still there. And it was. So I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was someone in a hurry who perhaps almost ran into me absent-mindedly. As I finished grabbing my drinks, I glanced at him. He stopped a few feet from me, hands behind his back, casually walking back and forth, looking at drinks. He did not have a cart or a basket, but maybe he was just grabbing some drinks and didn't need one. I moved on to another aisle, and after I reached to grab something and turned around, there he is again, except this time a few feet from me again, hands behind his back, looking at items in the aisle. Spooked at this point, I went to check out. As I'm in line, I look behind me and don't see him. Good, I'm in the clear. I turn my head back around, and bam, there he is on my left, looking at something near the checkout line. There are several different checkout lines as well as a self-checkout, so the odds of him being there coincidentally seemed low. He still did not have a cart or any items. Not knowing what else to do, I just stare directly at him until he notices me. He immediately walks off and I don't see him again. Considering how close he got, I think he was trying to steal from me. I was probably seen as an easy target because I was alone with a purse. Either that, or I just stared down some innocent poor soul. When I was 17, me and one of my friends applied for a work experience program in the UK, in a town near Brighton. We'd already done so the year before that, and kind of like the whole homestay with a family, work in a pub formula. At the time, we were constantly looking for weed, and in the first days, had very little luck finding some. So on about the 5th day, after having dinner by ourselves, we went for a walk in the city center near the piers of the little town. While walking down the avenue adjacent to the beach, which was also relatively crowded, we saw 2 young guys in their 30s smoking cigarettes by an alley and tried our luck. As soon as we asked for some weed, the 2 of them looked at each other and smirked. One of the 2 pulled out their phone and made an obvious fake call to a friend, asking whether he had some weed without even waiting a second for an answer before hanging up. At that point, they started circling around us and pointed to the end of the alley, saying their friend would be meeting all of us there and that he was also a bit of a funny guy. As if the whole thing wasn't enough, this last sentence triggered our instinct. We quickly turned them down and walked away. The next day at dinner, we had a conversation with the family we were staying at. And after a while, the mother brought up how in the last 2 years, the town saw spiking abductions of both children and teens. I have no idea if what we were about to experience would have been a standard mugging or something more sinister, but probably trip in the nearby forest. We packed our gear, including a tent, sleeping bags, and some food, and headed out for our adventure. The forest was dense, with towering trees and thick underbrush, but we found a clearing that looked perfect for setting up camp. We pitched our tent, built a fire, and settled in for the night. As we sat by the fire, enjoying the warmth and the peaceful sounds of the forest, we heard something moving in the bushes nearby. At first, we thought it might be an animal, but then we heard a strange whispering sound, like someone speaking in hushed tones. We both froze, listening intently, trying to make out what was being said. The whispering grew louder, and we realized that it wasn't just one voice, but many voices, all speaking at once. It was as if a crowd of people was gathered just beyond the edge of the clearing, murmuring to each other in an incomprehensible language. Feeling uneasy, we decided to investigate. We grabbed our flashlights and cautiously made our way towards the source of the sound. As we got closer, the whispering grew louder and more intense, until it felt like it was echoing inside our heads. Then, suddenly, we broke through the underbrush and stumbled into a small clearing. What we saw there made our blood run cold. Standing in the center of the clearing were several figures dressed in tattered clothing, their faces obscured by shadows. They were swaying back and forth, chanting in a language we couldn't understand. In front of them was a small altar made of stones, with strange symbols carved into the ground around it. Terrified, we turned and ran back to our campsite, not stopping until we reached the safety of our tent. We huddled together, trembling with fear, as the chanting continued outside. Eventually, the chanting faded away, and the forest fell silent once more. We stayed awake for the rest of the night, too afraid to sleep, until the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees. When morning came, we packed up our campsite as quickly as we could and fled the forest, vowing never to return. To this day, we have no idea who or what those figures were, or what dark ritual they were performing in the depths of the forest that night. But one thing is for sure: we will never forget the terror we felt in those haunted woods. Only imagine that it's not something safe for work. To even hear the story, I ran past the van towards the road to try and flag down a passing car or find help. When I looked back, I saw my girlfriend unlocking the car door, and the man was now only a few feet away from her. I yelled at her to hurry as I continued running towards her, just as she opened the car door and jumped inside. I heard the man shout something unintelligible, and then he stopped pursuing us. I quickly got into the car, and we sped away from the parking lot, leaving the mysterious man and his rusty white van behind us. As we drove home, shaken but safe, we couldn't stop talking about what had just happened. Who was that man? What did he want? And why did he stop chasing us? We were grateful to have escaped unharmed. But the experience left us both feeling uneasy and wary of camping in secluded places again. To this day, we still wonder about that night in the woods and the strange man who seemed to appear out of nowhere. It's a reminder to always trust our instincts and be cautious when exploring unfamiliar places, especially at night. It seems like you've recounted a thrilling and chilling tale of a camping trip gone awry. The narrative is filled with tension and suspense, keeping the reader on the edge of their seat until the very end. The inclusion of vivid descriptions and sensory details enhances the atmosphere of fear and uncertainty, making the experience feel all too real. The encounter with the mysterious and menacing figure in the woods adds an element of horror to the story, leaving the protagonists and the readers alike questioning the true intentions of the stranger. The sudden escalation of danger and the frantic escape create a sense of urgency and adrenaline, culminating in a dramatic and nail-biting conclusion. Overall, the story effectively captures the essence of a classic horror narrative. With its blend of eerie atmosphere, unexpected twists, and heart-pounding action, it serves as a reminder of the importance of trusting one's instincts and being cautious when venturing into unknown territory, especially in secluded areas. Come, this phenomenon, often referred to as deathbed visions or end-of-life hallucinations, is a fascinating yet eerie occurrence that has been documented by medical professionals and caregivers for centuries. While these visions may seem unsettling to those witnessing them, they are often described as comforting or peaceful by the individuals experiencing them. There are various theories surrounding the origin and significance of deathbed visions. Some believe that these visions may be a manifestation of the dying person's subconscious mind, offering comfort and reassurance as they transition from life to death. Others speculate that these visions could be spiritual or metaphysical in nature, possibly involving the presence of deceased loved ones or angelic beings guiding the individual towards the afterlife. Regardless of the interpretation, deathbed visions are a poignant reminder of the mysteries surrounding death and the human experience. They highlight the complex interplay between the physical, emotional, and spiritual dimensions of existence, offering insight into the profound journey that occurs at the end of life. For healthcare professionals and caregivers, witnessing deathbed visions can be both perplexing and humbling. It serves as a reminder of the importance of providing compassionate and holistic care to individuals at the end of their lives, acknowledging and respecting their unique experiences and beliefs. In conclusion, the tales shared here offer a glimpse into the realms of the unknown, the mysterious, and the unexplained. From eerie encounters in the dead of night to unsettling experiences on the brink of life and death, each story serves as a reminder of the complexities of the human experience and the mysteries that lie beyond our comprehension. As we navigate through life, encountering moments of fear, uncertainty, and wonder, may we draw strength from our shared humanity and find solace in the bonds that connect us, whether facing the unknown with courage, seeking answers adventures in the depths of the supernatural, or simply embracing the mysteries that surround us, let us approach each chapter of our lives with curiosity, resilience, and compassion. And as we bid farewell to these tales, may they linger in our thoughts, sparking conversations, igniting imaginations, and inspiring us to explore the depths of our existence with open hearts and minds. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the realms of the extraordinary. Until we meet again, may you walk in the light, guided by curiosity, courage, and the enduring spirit of adventure. Farewell, dear friends, and may your path be illuminated by the mysteries that await beyond the horizon.